Welcome to the world today. I'm Waqas Majeed. Today we are talking about the JCC meeting which is underway at the moment, and that is concerning the Pakistan-China economic corridor, a very important project for Pakistan's prosperity and future. So we'll be talking about the outcome of the JCC meeting. We have some reports regarding the happenings in the meeting, as well as before this meeting actually took place. There were a number of steps that were taken by the Pakistani as well as Chinese governments. We'll discuss those in detail. Our second topic is the Middle East situation, and Saudi and Iran are again in a tussle, and what would be Pakistan's role in trying to smoothen out the ruffled feathers on both sides, because both countries are important to Pakistan, and we hope that Pakistan can play a proactive, positive role to reduce the tensions between these two countries. So we'll talk a bit about that as well. And finally, our third topic concerns our health, and the World Health Organization has published a report which says that the end of modern medicine as we know it seems to be in sight, as a number of antibiotics are no longer working, and the germs or the bacteria have now developed resistance to a large number of antibiotics, and there might be a resurgence of previously benign diseases turning into very dangerous diseases. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of that as well. Let's get the conversation started. Let me introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today, we have, first of all, Qamar, who's an academic and a regular on our show. Joining him today, we have Dr. Mohammed Munir. He works with the Islamabad Policy Research Institute. Thank you very much for being here, both of you. Cheema Sahab, I'd like to start with you because as you know that the JCC meeting is already underway. Most important aspects of this meeting is the special economic zones that we've also spoken about earlier. So in your opinion, what is the next step? Now the special economic zones have been set up. How are they going to be further developed, if you have any information regarding that?
Well, I think this meeting that is happening at the moment, the most important point is that both countries are going to decide that what we have to do for the next 13-15 years. So this is a long-term plan they're discussing, so there is a strategic picture between both the pictures that is being designed. So I think that is good for the bilateral relationship between both the countries, and that also means there is a lot on the plate. We have been talking on CPEC as far as we're talking that there is an infrastructure transformation going on. That's fine. But with this kind of long-term plans being discussed, that means that since the infrastructure has been laid out, now there is something that will be on those infrastructures or on the sidelines of those. And as you were talking that special economic zones are being constructed and both the countries are following, I think this is what the Chinese and Pakistani government want, that until there are no economic zones, we cannot see that economic activity in a favorable environment will not be boosted. Let me tell you that if you want an economic growth actually to be, you need to provide a favorable environment. An economic zone is actually a favorable environment for boosting economic growth. For example, we have a GDP growth rate at 5.8% at the moment going on. That's fine. But if we want a consistent and long-term plan, and for that we need to provide that favorable sustainability.
And also the second phase of the CPEC, when we actually see those infrastructure projects which have been initiated, roads, rail, power, energy infrastructure that has been set up and is in the process of being set up, that will now be taken to the next level. So that is our hope. How will that translate into economic benefits that trickle down to the actual people? Dr. Saab, if you have any views regarding that.
I think CPEC, which has four main components, that is first was the energy product, that is prerequisite of CPEC, that because we have shortfall of energy. And by 2018, I think 10,000 megawatt will be added. Every year, 10% energy demand is increasing in Pakistan. So we have deficiency of about 6,000 megawatt. So this 10,000 would be added to our energy, because energy, I think, is the prerequisite for this CPEC. And then we have second project is infrastructure development. That is lifeline for the CPEC. Because now we see that roads are being built and motorways are being built, and a lot of progress has been made, especially on Crocking Highway only. And in this seventh meeting, one portion that was left, that will also be discussed in this seventh joint meeting. And in motorway, and then other portion that is railway, that is also under consideration, feasibility studies about railways. And other project that would come is the third one. that is Gwadar port. That is the gateway of CPEC. And now you have listened this, that the work has been started on international airport there, and then there is a master plan for the development of the Gwadar city. That is very important, because when you are building this port, you also need a big city, because a lot of people would be coming there, and you have to establish industrial zone there. So, and you also need to take up the power energy, because for the time being we are taking electricity from Iran, and then I think we should also build some powerhouse there that is required. Because
even more important is the provision of drinking water and water generally. That is the biggest issue.
That is very important. Recently I was in China, and this issue was raised by Chinese as well, but they're saying that there is a plant that is sufficient for the, as well as port is concerned. But for the district, Gwadar, there is a problem, because they cannot provide, because this port is under federal government, and the whole district would be under the provincial government. So this is a matter between province and the government, and that can be solved. And I think the governments are working on this direction. And this is the second. The third portion of that is, I think, Gwadar port and related project, and connectivity with Gwadar port. We have infrastructure projects which are going on, and related to that, there are some roads initially in the western route which were being built by Pakistan government. Now China has shown interest that that roads can also be taken under CPEC. So that will be also ease of Pakistan economically, because that will be smart. And other thing is, after you have all this, you also need to have some productivity. That is fourth pillar of the CPEC, that is industrialization.
Right.
Because first three portion were the initial, early phase of the project. Now we are entering to the transition next phase of CPEC, that is long-term project. For example, in long-term plans, you have hydro projects as well. There will be a lot of electricity would be produced, and then you have industrial zone where there will be productivity. You will have to, already Pakistan government has identified 46 industrial zones, and from this about 9 have already been identified, has been agreed by China and Pakistan to build. But now actually feasibility studies will be discussed, where these industrial zones should be built and what kind of feasibility. That is very important, because the location and keeping in view the infrastructure, keeping in view the resources we have, and keeping in view the human development or capacity we have. I think that these are very important.
Absolutely. Let's move on into our next question, which is a tricky one, because one of the things that has been reported in the press, Cheema Saab, is about the use of Chinese currency in Gwadar and maybe in other areas of Pakistan as well, and that is a sticking point right now. The Pakistani government is not right now in a place where it can allow that sort of thing to happen. And also about the fact that since most international trade is done in US dollars, how will that work out when we are dealing with the Chinese, when they would like to see business being conducted in their currency? So what are the pros and cons regarding the use of currency in terms of trade between China and Pakistan, and also in terms of the international markets?
Well, definitely China has been long working on to that introduce its currency, or for example, the Americans have a very long problem with the China. So what the Chinese want, I think Chinese want phased introduction of the Chinese currency into the new markets. For example, they believe that Pakistan is a country with whom we have a good bilateral economic trade relationship is going. So Pakistan may be a favorable country which can accept their demand. But as I was talking that we deal with the dollar, and definitely having Chinese currency, we are not ready for that, because the entire banking sector will have to take on board. And that has yet to be decided, that the banking sector and the State Department, what kind of proposal do they give to have the Chinese currency as replacing the international dollar. And this is where I think the international markets and the international community will be raising questions, and that will be one step earlier, one step ahead to the Chinese ambitious plans as well, which we also need to keep in mind that with this all economic incentive, with all economic plans what they're having, there is also the political incentive they have to have. But looking at this, I think the home homework I think the Pakistani authorities will have to do on that, because there is no hassle in that. The countries are doing trade in
other
this way, in other
currencies
currencies
other than the
than dollar or euro or pound sterling. The currencies are doing, I think, but Pakistan has not been practicing that much. We have seen Iran has been doing that for long, and many other countries that have seen sanctions for long. But Chinese currency is a strong one, although they have lowered their value deliberately, and to the point when they raise the value, that will be interesting.
Okay, Cheema Sahab, before we continue, we've also been joined by Dr. Noor Fatma, who's a political analyst, economist. Let's get her views on this. Thank you for joining us. So can you tell us about the use of the Chinese yuan as against the US dollar? What is the exact pros and cons of this part of the CPEC and development in the CPEC project?
You see, after Second World War, there was always a need of a universal, acceptable currency. So far, for the so long time, there was a hegemon money that was the dollar. Then there was a unitary monetary system of EU, and then now every emerging economy, they need kind of a currency which they can deal internationally, so that they have some hegemony in that currency in that region also, and in their business and their trade. So if we see emerging China, and through particularly the lens of the CPEC, that has totally is a significance, and that will be in quite beneficial for Pakistan vis-a-vis in terms of exchange rate. So I think there was a need of another emerging currency, and I think Yen will be taking that position in future vis-a-vis CPEC.
So you're hopeful that in the future there will be a mechanism that will allow the Chinese yuan to be traded, or trade to occur in the Chinese yuan as opposed to the US dollar?
Because of the volume of the trade China will have with the rest of the world, and of course with Pakistan also, they need a currency basically which is suitable for their exchange rate. So yuan ultimately, there was also a speculation that this euro will not have any success, or will not be that much, it will not compatible with the dollar. But now we see, and of course euro is not that has not taken the position of a dollar, but it is vis-a-vis dollar that is still strong. So I think yuan will that will take its own time, but it will be successful as a currency as China want, and China will also make its hegemon position through the yuan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noor Fatma, for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. And coming back to the studio, Dr. Munir, let's also talk about the financing of various projects under the CPEC. And the Chinese, as you also mentioned, have offered to finance road links, especially when we talk about the 8.5 billion main line Karachi-Lahore-Peshawar railway line. That is also something that they've exhibited their interest in. Then also you mentioned the roads between Faisalabad, Punjab, Rashakai in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, all these projects to be financed by the Chinese. How important is this for Pakistan's economy? Because as we know that these projects were earlier also part of Pakistan's contribution towards CPEC. Now we're seeing that the ratio of the contribution may be skewed in China's favor. So how is that going to play out?
I think that is very important, because earlier you were spending your own resources for building some portion of roads, because China was initially just supporting was Sakhar to Multan motorway, and then it was building just one or two portion of Karakum highway, and then Hazara motorway. But now the other portion, western route, they are also now taken care of by Chinese. I think that will be put less burden on Pakistan economy, right. And that is very important. And regarding the 7th meeting also, because they on one hand they are now reviewing the progress already made on different projects, and now entering to the long-term phase. That is, as you mentioned, railway and the remaining work left on the CPEC projects.
All right, and the Secretary Planning has said that the pace of the work, the fast-track execution of the projects is quite satisfactory, and most of the projects are sticking to the timelines that were agreed. So that is a wonderful piece of news that has come from the ministry. What about the maintenance of international standards when we're talking about the completion of these projects? Is that going to be ensured as well, and who's in charge of ensuring that?
Well, definitely, I think if the projects are on time, they're being completed on time, that is because the finance is coming regularly. There is no problem as far as finance is concerned. But since, as we're talking that there are long-term projects, these are long-term projects, and the CPEC or this OBOR is not going to add in next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, it's a long-term plan. So definitely the money for the renovation of these infrastructure that will be generated from all these projects which are being, for example, if you are building economic zones or if you are getting incentives from there, so money will definitely be used from there, so that the profits which are will be made from by Pakistan or by the Chinese. But definitely the Chinese understand the constraint Pakistan economy has, so it will always be in the upper hand of the Chinese, or the support will always come from there, because Pakistan does not have that much priority because of its financial issues.
Or a strong industrial base. So this is the development of the industrial base that we're talking about.
And I think the most important point in this entire project, the CPEC or whatever is happening, is that how much the local investor is taking interest of that, how much important for the local industrialist it is important. If the local industrialists, local investors, the small industries or the larger industries, if they take interest, which we so far have not visualized much in bigger picture, but yes, definitely it is the job of the government to take on board to the local investors and buyers that how we view that. Till that time, there will be the balance of trade will not be favorable or not be in Pakistan, will not tilt towards Pakistan. So it all depends that how much we actually incorporate or how much we take part of this, and I think that is the Waqas, that is the most favorable moment in our history when we can actually boot our industrialization. Don't forget to know that the mixture of the GDP, which is services sector, industry, and the agriculture, the services sector is boosting fast, and we need to cut it down, or we need to enhance the industrial sector.
Absolutely, as well, that is the main thing.
Because that is the important. This CPEC can give us that initiative because the opportunity has come home.
Absolutely, there is no doubt in what you're saying is the most crucial aspect of development in the CPEC for Pakistan, and that is also one of the things that has been stated by the ministry. They do have a good understanding of that. The next phase of industrial cooperation between China and Pakistan in the CPEC, and with special reference to the special economic zones, is about creating a manufacturing hub in Pakistan as an epicenter to connectivity to the region. So how positive or hopeful are you regards to the amount of investment that will be coming from Pakistani investors in these special economic zones?
I think I'm very much optimistic and hopeful, and the prospects are very high. Because for the time being, if you see our trade patterns, we have only few items to export because we don't have diversified kind of items.
And they're mostly agriculture or raw materials.
Only few items. You have to diversify your export. That is why there is imbalance between our import and export.
And we need value-added industries.
Yeah, value-added industry, and also now we should see those industries where the labor in China is very high. So we can have cheap labor, and those industries which are closing in China because of the high labor charges, that can be shifted to Pakistan, and there are many other areas where we have raw material like gemstone, like other marbles and other kind of things, and textile. I think that these are where we can contribute a lot. And according to the raw material, according to availability of human resources, I think we can do a lot. And there is a lot. We have a lot of good furnitures. I think China is also importing their furniture market, because China, if you see their trade with the United States, major portion is the furniture. So I think they are shifting these industries to Vietnam, to other countries, and I think Pakistan could be one of the destination when this process of industrialization will start. I think that is very important. And one thing that Cheema Sahab has mentioned, I would also like to highlight that we should also integrate our federations, Chamber of Commerce, because they should be taken on board, because they should not feel that our local industry is being alienated. So they should be part of and parcel of this project. Because without involving, I think in this government has realized this point, and they have consulted with the Chamber of Commerce, and they would be main holders, stakeholders in India.
Absolutely, that's very important. Another very important aspect, which both of you can also lean in on and give your comments for, is about the importance of skill development. When we're talking about industries being moved to the special economic zones in Pakistan, we have a dearth of qualified individuals who will be able to work in those economic zones. So that is very important. We've spoken to China about that, and we're also talking about establishing centers for vocational training in Islamabad and other cities across the country. How important is that for the sustainability and development of CPEC and the overall goal?
Well, I think that is where the small industry comes in. That if you actually need the vocational training, even the bigger industry also comes in. I think what matters is that, unfortunately, majority of the skilled people we have actually got, even those PhD doctors who have come in, we have failed to integrate those people into our economy. For example, all those PhDs who are coming for, who have done PhDs in agriculture, how much they are contributing to enhance the agriculture output, or how much the state has been able to. So I think there needs to be a central pool actually where there should be a need from the need-based education or need-based vocational training that must be. For example, how much training is needed in Punjab and Balochistan, and this is where the Chamber of Commerces and the provincial governments can come up with the idea, and they can share it with the Higher Education Commission and with the vocational training institutes and with the federal government that this is how the level of, because almost some 2 million jobs are needed every year, looking at the level of the population growth which is increasing in Pakistan and this small industry. For example, let me give you an example. In my own village, a vocational training institute has been established and in my own village, and that was on the land of the former President Rafiq Tarad's personal land. And nobody from that, from some 5-10 villages go there. That is a 3-acre land, a vocational training institute somewhere in the village, but people have, although they have given incentives to people, some 500 rupees per month as a scholarship, you come and there is every kind of infrastructure is there, but students, the people have not been encouraged to that. So I think a kind of that environment need to be created, that if they come and they, so that certified people could be recommended for these kind of jobs. And I think, and for that the Chamber of Commerce which actually sometimes feel aloof, feel outside this process because they believe that there is no favorable environment for them for even bidding sometime. And this is where I think the government has been questioned to make a clear plan or to show us the full plan. Although there's a full plan is there, but definitely the governments have certain things which they show sometime phased, you may say, showcase they have, that we can show this to this point and after some time. But I think at the end of the day, what is needed is that whatever maximum training we can get from the Chinese and whatever maximum infrastructure, even in this educational or educational sector we should get. And this is where our students can go to China and they can learn or they get degrees from China, and they can come back and they need to be incorporated into industry. The only problem is that majority of the students who are getting education, they are not being incorporated, and this is where the public-private sector need to merge, because the private sector is not coming up with the research plans. For example, in China, I was looking a few days ago, the Chinese have asked the auto industry that you have to produce cars which are on renewable energy, which are being used by hybrid cars or the cars which are being used by the sun, or so you have to make complete. You need to give money, and you need to money for innovation. I think this is where we need to incorporate those people who are coming from abroad into our industry, and we need to force the industrial sector to invest and spend money on innovation, so that the new children, the new students who are getting education from abroad or from Pakistan, they could be incorporated.
That's very, very important. A very good point that you've raised, Cheema Saab. Taking that point further to Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, as Cheema Saab was saying, setting up of these vocational training institutes is imperative for the success of CPEC. What's your opinion in that?
I think that is very important, as Cheema Saab has mentioned. I also agree with that, because without human development, you cannot get met, because if you don't have human skills and human development, then Chinese worker would be coming and Chinese engineer would be coming, and they would be benefiting and Chinese would be employed here. But I think Chinese, when we have talking with them, that you should also hire local people and local population, so that and local labor, So they were saying that they are just using Chinese labor for the project, which for there they need efficiency.
Technical assistance.
Efficiency.
Or efficiency.
For the efficiency purpose. But in the long term, they were thinking that, and because of they think that Chinese, engineering, and they feel comfortable with their own labor because of language issues.
And there's a skill development issue as well, because the skills of an unskilled laborer are not comparable to those of an educated or skilled laborer. So that gap needs to be filled.
Yes.
So how will we provide the human resource for those activities when the human resource is not developed at all?
Of course, because our technical institutions are these vocational training institutions, they should be made relevant to our business activities. Because, for example, now we are building railways. We don't have railway engineering in Pakistan. So there's a need to introduce these subjects. Robots engineering is very important in China. So these new technologies and new engineering should also be introduced within Pakistan. And our education and technical vocation, those should be relevant to the existing industries, new industries.
Because they should have a practical application to what is happening around, and where they can find jobs. That is the most important thing. Also, another aspect to the vocational training is the relocation of certain industries from China to Pakistan, and that is also in tandem, or it has a very strong link with vocational training. When we're thinking of having Chinese manufacturing bases being shifted into Pakistan, then how are we going to provide the personnel to run those entities?
Well, I think there needs to be more coordination on it, and I think that coordination, there is definitely the coordination is there, but the plate is so full at the moment that even the government departments, they will have to think that how we have to work on those, because the Chinese are coming with too many things. It's not just it's not just Gawad, it's not just transport. Even they're working that how Pakistan's
there's connectivity, there's internet connectivity.
Internet connectivity, then the safe city projects in Pakistan, then
security is such a big issue.
Then the television networks, how they have to. So I think it seems as if the entire infrastructure from China is coming. That looks good, but also we have to look at the capability, that how much we can absorb.
Absolutely.
That particular infrastructure or investment is coming. Because if we don't do that, either that will rush back, or that will go in vain, or that will be wastage of potential.
Yes.
And don't forget that if this initiative or this input is not actually, does not actually is absorbed by our society, it will be a wastage of such huge potential that for the next 10 years, 20 years, our youth will be even will not be looking at it positively, but they will find it a kind of a burden on them. So all what we have to do is that we need to incorporate everyone, each segment of the society. The Chinese are sending each segment of their society in our country. So this is where we have to take on board everyone, that how we can be part of them, and that can only be if everyone is on board. We see the leadership is sitting there, that's fine. The leadership is having all that, but the leadership need to make it to the all departments. Since with the 18th Amendment, it is very tough for the investors to do business here, because all the 4 provinces have different legislations for that. Even if they have to talk on security, we have different police orders in all the 4 provinces. So they have to talk to everyone differently, don't forget that. So it means it is difficult, it is a challenge, but this is where I think the provinces, they have to make the challenge more comfortable, so that those investors who are coming, they don't feel shy, or they don't feel uncomfortable in making projects successful.
Indeed, absolutely. There's no doubt in what you're saying is very, very crucial for the success of the CPEC. Well, let's move on to our second segment. That is unfortunately to do with the politics of the Middle East, which it has been in a terrible turmoil for quite some time now. But let's talk about what role can Pakistan play in smoothing out the ruffled feathers of Iran and Saudi Arabia. And it seems that they're again, at daggers drawn. We are hoping that there can be some kind of a rapprochement. Also the fact that they need to understand that being brothers in Islam, they need to work together and cooperate rather than be antagonistic to each other. Isn't that going to be hurting the entire Ummah of Islam? And what's the way forward in your opinion, Cheema?
Well, I think Pakistan has tried to make a way out of this crisis. That was where the former Prime Minister and the former Army Chief visited both the countries. But let me tell you, this is a civilizational problem. This is not about Muslim countries. There are Arabs versus Persians, and don't forget they are not going to move away so easily. So I think let me be very crude on it. I think we actually do not have that capability to have both countries on table and to make them understand what they have to do.
But it's
Because
imperative for Pakistan, Cheema Sahib. I
This
mean,
is
if you look at
imperative-
Pakistan's issue, Pakistan is the sole Islamic nuclear power in the world. So
But
we
one
do
thing-
have some clout to pull for, within the Islamic community. We have some, leverage.
But I think one thing that is important, that Pakistan has showed a balanced approach to the Middle Eastern problems, and that is very. Don't forget, from 2003 to 2017, 22,000 people in Pakistan have been killed on the name of sectarianism. It's not an easy thing. The Pakistan understand, and the way Army Chief has visited Iran, Pakistan is opening up to Iran. That is very fundamentally, that should be clear to
But
everyone.
Saudi Arabia is very important to Pakistan, and keeping that in view, there are also press reports that the Chief of Army Staff and the Prime Minister might be visiting Saudi Arabia in the near future to discuss, the problems that are emanating from the Middle East. How important is it? What kind of a position should Pakistan be taking? Because Pakistan has already stated its role to be a neutral one, or rather that of a facilitator, one that can, be in a positive communicator sort of between these two powers. So, in your opinion, Dr. Saab, do you think Pakistan can have a positive impact on the deteriorating situation in the Middle East? Now, we've had Yemen, we've had Qatar, and then we've also now seen what's happening in Lebanon. All these things, if you look at it and put it together in the perspective of politics, it's not very good for the Middle East region. And it also shows how significant and powerful Israel is becoming as a result of the infighting between all these Islamic countries of the region. What's your take on
I
it?
think you're very much right. I totally agree with your comment that Pakistan should at least do should play some role. Also, Pakistan is neutral, but Pakistan should not be neutral. Pakistan should be positive neutral. Positive neutral means that we should keep into our reciprocity of relationship. What kind of reciprocity we have with Saudi Arabia? What kind of reciprocity we have Iran? Both countries are very important for Pakistan because Iran is our neighbor, and keeping in view Afghanistan issue, Iran is becoming very important because Iran has a lot of influence in Afghanistan now,
Right.
as compared to Pakistan. Pakistan
And
has
also
influence-
that we share a very long border
Long
with
border,
Iran,
and
so Pakistan cannot afford to antagonize
and
Iran.
keeping in view CPEC, because we have to IP gas pipeline, that is very important for the CPEC as well. So keeping in view our energy, and at the same level, Saudi Arabia is equally very important.
Absolutely.
For us, it is we have to keep very good balance between our policies, as well as we should try to facilitate and show that we are very much concerned about this rift, and we should proactively try to facilitate some kind of dialogue between the two countries.
We
Because
also,
that is
have
very-
we also have the phenomena of a large number of Pakistanis working in the Gulf countries. And what we've seen recently is that a number of these individuals have returned back to Pakistan. It's a huge number of people who have lost their jobs in the Middle East.
you're very much
And what kind of an impact or repercussions is that going to have for Pakistan's
I
economy?
think we should not give any gap to our policy with the Gulf countries, because India is also keenly observing this kind of situation and taking advantage of this situation. You see now building relation of India with UAE, that is very important. So Pakistan, cannot remain neutral. It can be positive neutral. That means keeping in view our relation with Iran and Saudi Arabia, we should at least play some role in facilitating some kind of reconciliation between the two countries, because that is very important. At least we should try. Also, we don't have the capacity, because even these two countries in Middle East, because they don't see Pakistan's much role. But Pakistan is a very important country, keeping in view our role in countering war on terrorism, but what role Pakistan has played, and the place Pakistan has in the Muslim countries. I think every common Muslim see towards Pakistan, that Pakistan would see, but at policy level, maybe people are thinking that Pakistan don't have any capacity, and its role is not very much desirable, and we should remain neutral. But I think Pakistan should play, and foreign affairs should play some kind of role.
A positive role.
Positive role.
Yeah, and that positive role basically means in order to remove any misunderstandings
and should send some
concerns.
Because we take some initiative. Sometime our Prime Minister went to Iran and then Saudi Arabia, then we just stop it because we said there's no response. But we should continue at other levels. We should continue, maybe at backdoor diplomacy, we should continue whatsoever we can do, because that is very important, because it is not only issue of Saudi Arabia and Iran, but it is an issue of Muslim Ummah, because how this will impact the whole Ummah. That is very important.
I would like to add, if you allow
Please,
me.
Cheema, sir.
What I feel is that Pakistan is vulnerable in a situation. If you just look at that, how much foreign remittance is coming from Middle East. About $20 billion are coming in foreign remittance from across the world to Pakistan. And from that $20 billion, some $12 billion is coming from Middle East. And from that $12 billion, $6 billion is coming from Saudi Arabia. This is where the vulnerability starts. And this is where the Indians, as Munir was mentioning, the Indians are having some $35 billion as remittance from Middle East. Pakistan is having somewhere $12 billion, so one third of
that should be an eye-opener for many who have eyes to open that. So, moving on, I want to continue with this this line of questioning. If you look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia under the new Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, lots of changes are taking place on a social level in Saudi Arabia. What kind of an impact, if any, do you think is going to happen on Pakistan in a social dynamic because of the changes that are taking place now in Saudi Arabia, where it's becoming more open and more relaxed in many ways?
Well, I think there is a complete reformation that is happening in Saudi Arabia, and that reformation for many, I think. But what is happening is that actually Prince Salman, the Crown Prince Salman, sorry, he wants to have legitimacy, and he also is working for his survival, because we have seen a news where that he may replace his father as king. Where the father will have will only be the custodian of the two.
He will abdicate in favor of his son.
Yes, so that will be, I think, he wants actually the complete power, authority and monopoly, and they feel that that is why they're assertive to the, so what they have been doing is that he's harsh on the family, those who are actually they're the strong players within the family, so that he can take their support and he can show them, look, I'm here, I'm powerful. At the same time, he has also been tough, and he also given a message to the clergy in Saudi Arabia. Don't forget that the clergy, the right wing or the Islamic establishment is very powerful, and that has been empowered and raised by the family itself. So we have to see that both the family, the cousins and the Islamic clergy, they have been given strong message that here I am and I'm here and I will have legitimacy, and you have to obey what I'm saying. That is good for them. But at the same time, they're opening for the West, because they believe that, for example, the United Nations have given a report that what is happening in Yemen is because of the Saudis not letting
blockading basically.
They have done. So I think they're opening up to the West, and he's also having legitimacy at home. So he's working at home, and he's also giving a message that we can have reformation in next 30, 40 years. We have to do it now, and he wanted it abrupt. So it is seen that the Crown Prince is in hurry, but he understands that he needs legitimacy immediately.
I think we'll wrap it up over here right now, because before I do my concluding remarks, I think thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV World on these very important topics. Before we end the program, we have one more problem to discuss, and that is that we have a very troubling report from the World Health Organization saying that the end of modern medicine as we know it is very near. And the reason for that is that we have been abusing antibiotics. Especially the problem in Pakistan is multiplied manifold, because we don't have those kind of rules and regulations that manage drugs being available to people over the counter. Lots of fake doctors operating in Pakistan. The number of quacks that are operating in Pakistan is somewhere near 600,000 people practicing medicine without a license. That is also a situation which is unsustainable. Again, the Pakistan Medical Association and Drug Regulatory Authority have failed to regulate or even seriously debate the high sales of antibiotics. So I hope that the health department of the government wakes up to this emergency sooner rather than later. And with that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.
Thank you.